The desert dawn crept slowly over the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the rocky expanse. The air was dry and still, carrying a faint metallic scent that mingled with the dust stirred by the early morning breeze. The military base lay tucked into a narrow valley, a temporary cluster of sand-colored buildings and tents, barely visible against the backdrop of rugged hills. Here, time seemed to stretch, measured more in the rhythm of routine than the rising sun. Soldiers moved methodically, their voices low, their footsteps deliberate, each action calibrated for efficiency. Amid this quiet, a lone figure knelt on the coarse, sandy ground, her form steady, her movements meticulous. Lieutenant Mara Bennett was already awake, though the rest of her unit stirred slowly. Her hands, calloused but precise, cradled the M2010 sniper rifle, the crown jewel of her arsenal. The rifle gleamed faintly in the morning light, each part carefully aligned, each bolt polished. It was more than a weapon to her. It was an extension of herself, a silent partner in the dangerous profession she had chosen. Mara worked slowly, methodically. Her gloved fingers traced the contours of the barrel, removing the faintest speck of dust that might interfere with the delicate mechanics. She unscrewed the scope, inspecting it for tiny scratches, recalibrating the lens with the practiced touch of someone who had spent thousands of hours performing the same ritual. Around her, other soldiers hurried to complete their own morning tasks, loading ammo, checking vehicles, consulting maps, and murmuring over radios. But Mara existed in a bubble of quiet focus. The world beyond her rifle, the clattering of boots, the hum of generators, the faint echo of distant artillery practice, seemed to fade into an indistinct blur. There was a rhythm to her actions, a sequence learned and refined over years of training. She checked the trigger pull, ensuring it was precise and consistent. She examined the bipod, making minor adjustments to guarantee stability when the shot mattered most. Each adjustment was a quiet testament to her discipline. She approached her rifle as a craftsman approaches a masterpiece, balancing patience, precision, and respect. Cleaning, tightening, and adjusting were not chores. They were rituals, meditative acts that sharpened her mind and honed her reflexes. Her eyes, sharp and attentive, scanned the horizon intermittently. Even while performing what seemed to an outsider like a routine task, Mara's mind was alert. She measured the heat waves rising from the rocky terrain, imagined the wind currents skimming the ridges, and anticipated how they might affect a bullet's flight. Her training had taught her that even a fraction of a degree could be the difference between a successful mission and failure. Each morning, the same desert could behave differently, and a sniper had to be ready for every subtle change. A soft click drew her attention. The radio crackled briefly, a low-frequency hum that carried the faintest hints of a new mission or updated intelligence. Mara did not immediately respond. First came the ritual of preparation, the quiet intimacy of tending to her rifle. She removed the dust cloth, brushing her fingers over the polished wood stock, noting its smoothness, the tiny nicks that marked years of use. She adjusted the cheek rest, ensuring it aligned perfectly with her eye, and centered the crosshairs in her mind's scope even before peering through it. From a ridge a few hundred meters away, a Navy SEAL paused mid-observation. Lieutenant Mara Bennett had not noticed him yet, and that was precisely the way she wanted it. The SEAL, a veteran of countless operations, had learned to recognize the aura of someone who belonged entirely to their craft. He watched her hands move with an almost hypnotic precision, each action deliberate and practiced. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, just the quiet confidence of someone who had mastered the tools of her trade. He found himself studying the way she breathed, the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes flickered with focus. Her rifle was more than a weapon. It was a reflection of her personality. Meticulous, patient, and unwavering. She had spent countless hours learning every nuance of the M2010, from the weight of the trigger pulled to the vibration of the barrel when fired. This intimacy with her equipment gave her an advantage most could not comprehend. The SEAL's gaze lingered for a moment longer, a silent acknowledgement of her mastery. He knew that in her hands, the rifle could achieve what most considered impossible. Mara's mind drifted briefly to the past training in remote mountain ranges, long hours observing targets, calculating wind speeds, and mastering the mathematics of ballistic trajectories. She recalled her instructor's voices, the lessons in patience, focus, and self-control. Each moment of practice had been a test of discipline, often boring, repetitive, and mentally exhausting. Yet those hours now shaped her in ways that were impossible to measure, until moments like this, when the desert itself became her classroom. The sun had risen higher, casting sharper shadows over the base. The heat was beginning to shimmer across the sand and rocks, creating visual distortions that could deceive even the most experienced eye. Mara paused, wiping the sweat from her temple with the back of her gloved hand. She squinted at the horizon, noting subtle differences from the previous day, the tilt of a ridge, the glint off a distant rock, the faint movement of the wind over the sand. Each detail mattered. The environment was not static, and a sniper must adapt constantly. As she reassembled her scope, she murmured the calibration steps under her breath. The numbers were automatic now, ingrained from years of practice, yet she repeated them as a safeguard, an affirmation of readiness. A faint breeze carried dust across her hands, and she flicked it away with precision. The rifle was aligned, clean, and ready. Her heartbeat remained steady, controlled, a quiet drum beneath the vast silence of the desert. She had no idea, at that moment, that someone was watching, that her routine actions would soon catch the attention of a Navy SEAL whose respect would follow her for the rest of the mission. Mara rose slightly, testing the bipod on the uneven ground, adjusting the legs until the rifle rested perfectly. She practiced a dry aim, scanning across the ridges and valleys, imagining potential targets, and calculating distances in her mind's eye. Even without a target in sight, she moved as though every shot counted, every second mattered. Discipline and preparation had become instinct. Instinct, in turn, had become a form of art. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She simply existed in this space between action and anticipation, a silent guardian in the heat and dust of the desert. The SEAL, hidden in the shadowed ridge, could not help but feel a twinge of awe. Here was a soldier, alone in her methodical routine, transforming an ordinary morning into a demonstration of skill that few would ever witness. He adjusted his optics again, observing the fine details of her movements. The way she cleaned the rifle, the careful check of each sight, and the confident alignment with the horizon, it all signaled more than preparation. It hinted at extraordinary capability, a calm readiness for challenges that most would find unimaginable. Mara crouched, resting her rifle lightly on the bipod, peering through the scope at a distant ridge that caught the early sunlight. She imagined the wind currents, the heat distortion, and the gravitational arc of a bullet over hundreds of meters. Though this was just practice, just a quiet moment in her routine, she felt a thrill, a connection to the craft that only came from understanding it completely. Her focus was absolute, and yet the smallest dial, a distant glint, a shadow, a whisper of movement could command her immediate attention. Minutes passed in this quiet rhythm. The base stirred around her, yet she remained entirely in her own world. She wiped the barrel one last time, inspected the scope, and ran her hand along the stock. Everything was as it should be. She adjusted the rifle slightly, testing its balance and alignment, imagining the precision required for a long-distance shot. The SEAL finally broke his silence, a low, impressed murmur escaping him as he witnessed the combination of calm, skill, and discipline before him. Here was someone who could turn the mundane act of cleaning a rifle into an affirmation of excellence. Mara sat back on her heels for a moment, letting the weight of the rifle rest comfortably against her shoulder. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining the desert landscape as a grid of measurements, distances, and possibilities. Each ridge, each rock, each glint of sunlight across the sand was a variable to consider. Her mind raced quietly through ballistic tables, wind calculations, and target profiles, as if she were rehearsing a dance whose choreography had been perfected over countless hours. This was not arrogance, it was readiness, honed through years of discipline and dedication. The morning continued to unfold slowly. Mara began to pack her rifle carefully, checking each component one last time. The SEAL, still observing, noted her meticulous attention to detail. Every action was deliberate, purposeful, and precise. There was no hurry, no careless movement, only the quiet rhythm of preparation and focus. She rose to her feet, adjusted the strap over her shoulder, and walked toward her assigned post with the grace of someone entirely in command of her environment. The desert heat climbed higher, dust dancing in shimmering waves across the ground. Mara's presence was steady and reassuring, a calm in the midst of potential chaos. The base was alive with activity, yet she remained centered, her rifle a trusted companion, her mind sharp, her senses alert. She was ready for anything, though she did not yet know what the day would demand. And in that moment, a lone SEAL watched, realizing that something extraordinary was unfolding quietly before his eyes. From his vantage point atop the rugged ridge, the Navy SEAL remained perfectly still, blending into the jagged rock and sand around him. He had been observing the terrain for hours, cataloging enemy positions, evaluating potential threats, and planning the safest approach routes for his team. His gaze, trained through years of combat and reconnaissance, had seen countless soldiers in countless environments. But Mara Bennett, kneeling quietly in the desert below, her rifle cradled in patient hands, was unlike anyone he had ever observed. There was a precision in her movements that transcended training. It spoke of instinct honed to near perfection. The SEAL adjusted his optics again, zooming in on her meticulous routine. Her hands moved with deliberate care as she wiped dust from the barrel and checked the alignment of her scope. Each action, he realized, was purposeful, deliberate, a silent rehearsal of precision that few could appreciate without intimate knowledge of the craft. Most snipers would have been impatient, rushing through checks or skipping steps, but Mara operated at a different rhythm. Her discipline suggested not just skill, but a deep reverence for her rifle, for the craft of marksmanship, and for the lives that depended on her accuracy. He watched as she detached the scope, examined its lenses under the morning sunlight, and reassembled it with careful fingers. He noted the way she tested the trigger pull, adjusted the bipod, and inspected the stock for even the tiniest imperfections. It was almost meditative, and yet it carried a silent intensity. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only unwavering focus. The SEAL found himself unconsciously holding his breath, mesmerized by the quiet display of expertise. Here was someone entirely in command of her tools and her environment. He knew the signs of a true expert. The way her shoulders relaxed just slightly as she checked the rifle's balance. The subtle narrowing of her eyes as she scanned the horizon. The steady rhythm of her breathing, controlled yet natural, synchronized with every careful movement. He had seen snipers panic under pressure, fumble with their equipment, or miscalculate the wind at critical moments. Mara, in contrast, radiated a calm confidence that suggested years of experience distilled into instinctive action. She was the embodiment of precision, a professional who had internalized the desert itself as part of her calculation. The SEAL shifted slightly, careful not to disturb the loose gravel beneath him. He noted the dust rising from her movements, the faint shimmer of heat over the sand, and the interplay of shadows across the terrain. Every detail mattered, and yet she seemed aware of all of it without appearing burdened. His mind raced with admiration and curiosity. Who was she? How long had she been deployed here? And, more importantly, what was the true extent of her skill? The answer would become clear, though the magnitude of it would leave him astonished. Below, Mara's attention remained entirely on her rifle and the surrounding landscape. She had perfected a habit of internalizing every variable: wind speed, heat distortion, terrain elevation, and bullet drop. Each minor adjustment she made was deliberate and precise, yet executed with an elegance that made her movements appear almost effortless. To an observer, she might have seemed simply methodical, but the SEAL could sense the latent power behind her calm demeanor. He recognized it immediately. She was preparing for a potential shot at a distance most would never attempt, a shot that required both skill and courage in equal measure. Time seemed to stretch as he observed her. The desert remained silent around her, save for the occasional whisper of wind over rocks and sand. Birds circled high above, their shadows briefly crossing her line of sight. Mara continued to adjust her rifle, testing the bipod, aligning the scope, and rehearsing her breathing. The SEAL noticed how she visualized the trajectory in her mind, how she anticipated every factor that could influence a bullet traveling over extreme distance. It was a rare skill, one that combined mathematics, intuition, and nerves of steel. The SEAL's respect deepened with each passing moment. He had worked alongside countless sharpshooters, observed precision shots from extreme ranges, and yet he had rarely encountered someone who combined technical mastery with such composure. There was a quiet humility in Mara's movements. She did not flaunt her skill. She simply practiced it with relentless dedication. Even when the wind shifted slightly, she adjusted seamlessly, recalculating in her mind the path a bullet would take, as though conversing silently with the rifle in her hands. He began to consider the possibilities. If the situation demanded, she could take a shot few others would even attempt. At nearly 3 kilometers, the margin for error would be infinitesimal. Most snipers would hesitate, most would miscalculate the variables, most would falter under the weight of responsibility. But Mara seemed to inhabit a different realm entirely, one where patience, precision, and discipline converged into decisive action. The SEAL felt a rare mixture of awe and reassurance. If she were on his team, he would know that critical distances could be conquered with deadly accuracy. Yet, for now, she was unaware of his gaze. He could see the subtle tensing of her muscles as she tested the rifle's alignment, the micro-adjustments she made to the scope, the careful attention to detail that defined every movement. It was a reminder of how silently dangerous a sniper could be, how quietly a life could be protected or a mission altered without a sound. He found himself thinking about all the missions he had run, the countless times a single shot had changed outcomes, and realized that her calm competence made her a rare asset in any operation. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the desert. Dust rose in faint spirals from the wind and Mara's movements, mingling with the heat shimmer that rippled across the landscape. She crouched, aligning her rifle with an imagined target on the distant ridge. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, and her eyes narrowed slightly as she calculated the necessary adjustments. Every instinct, every calculation, every training exercise she had endured culminated in this quiet moment. The SEAL felt as if he were witnessing something extraordinary, a performance of skill that few were privileged to see firsthand. He thought back to his own training, to long hours observing terrain, calculating distances, and synchronizing with fellow operators. Mara's methodology, though, surpassed most of what he had experienced. She did not rush, she did not second-guess, she did not show signs of distraction. She existed entirely within the moment, in complete harmony with her environment, rifle, and mind. Watching her, he felt a mixture of inspiration and professional humility. This was someone who had internalized the desert, mastered the rifle, and achieved a focus that few could comprehend. The SEAL began to wonder how she had reached this level of proficiency. Was it years of rigorous training, countless hours of live fire practice, or innate talent refined by discipline? Perhaps it was all of these things. Whatever the answer, the results were undeniable. Mara's calm presence and precise movements were not just practice, they were an indication that she could execute a shot of nearly impossible distance if required. That realization sent a shiver of respect down his spine. He continued observing, noting how she adjusted for minute variations in the terrain and air currents. Every detail mattered, and every adjustment demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of physics, wind patterns, and human physiology. He imagined her taking a long-range shot in the heat of combat and knew instinctively that she would not fail. Her dedication, focus, and skill made her a rare force, someone whose capabilities could decisively influence any engagement. The thought was sobering, even inspiring. Mara finally paused in her routine, standing and resting the rifle lightly against her shoulder. She scanned the horizon, eyes sweeping across the desert landscape, alert and aware. The SEAL recognized the subtle signs of readiness. Every motion, every glance, every breath indicated preparedness for the unexpected. Even in her apparent stillness, she was calculating, anticipating, adapting. For the SEAL, it was a revelation. Here was someone who could take command of the environment, the weapon, and the moment without a word, without a signal, entirely through skill and intuition. Minutes passed, yet the SEAL remained frozen in his observation point, unwilling to disturb the quiet mastery before him. He knew that this was rare, a moment few ever witnessed. Mara's presence, her meticulous attention to detail, her calm yet intense focus, all spoke of extraordinary capability. He watched as she adjusted her rifle one last time, testing the trigger, aligning the scope, and rehearsing a shot that, at nearly 3 kilometers, would challenge even the most experienced marksman. In that moment, the SEAL understood something profound. Mara Bennett was not just another sniper. She was a master of her craft. Every movement, every adjustment, every silent calculation demonstrated a combination of skill, experience, and composure rarely seen in the field. He felt a mixture of admiration and reassurance. If she were on his team, he knew that critical situations could be met with deadly precision. She was a professional, a craftsman, and a warrior, all in one, quietly commanding respect without even realizing it. The desert sun continued to rise, casting long shadows that danced over the rocks and sand. Mara resumed her cleaning, methodically brushing dust from her rifle, checking each part and adjusting her scope. The SEAL finally exhaled silently, a low sense of awe settling over him. He had witnessed a soldier at the height of her discipline, someone whose skill and focus could turn the most routine act, cleaning a rifle, into a demonstration of extraordinary mastery. He knew that what he had observed was only the beginning of a story that would leave a lasting impression. The radio crackled, a low hum cutting through the quiet rhythm of the desert morning. Mara Bennett had been methodically cleaning her M2010, her hands tracing every inch of the rifle with careful precision, when the first words of the briefing reached her ears. High-value target confirmed. Coordinates received. Distance, approximately 2,942 meters. The number hung in the air like a challenge, almost absurd in its extremity. Mara's eyes, calm and sharp, met the distant horizon as if calculating the distance visually before her mind even had to process it. She allowed herself a brief pause, letting the words settle. Nearly 3 kilometers, that was beyond the range most snipers considered practical. Yet Mara's pulse remained steady. Years of training had prepared her for extreme conditions, for long-range shots that tested both skill and nerve. She had imagined moments like this, countless times in simulations, on training ranges, and during previous deployments. But the reality, the actual target lying somewhere in the distant desert, waiting, was altogether different. Preparation, focus, and discipline were essential, but execution would demand flawless precision. Her team began assembling near the tactical command tent, unfolding maps, consulting digital readouts, and marking coordinates on laminated grids. Mara rose, the weight of her rifle resting comfortably against her shoulder. She walked with deliberate steps, her boots crunching softly on the sand. The wind carried small clouds of dust, which she ignored, focused entirely on the mental calculus building inside her mind. Every movement had been practiced. Every contingency had been anticipated. Her presence commanded quiet respect. Other snipers exchanged quick glances, knowing she had handled assignments far more complex than most of them would ever encounter. The briefing officer pointed to the large digital map on the wall, highlighting the target's last confirmed location. Mara's eyes scanned the terrain valleys, ridges, heat mirages, and subtle shadows. Distance was the first challenge, but it was far from the only one. She considered the elevation, the wind currents shifting along the ridgelines, the shimmering heat rising from the sand, and the bullet drop over nearly 3 kilometers. Each factor had to be calculated, weighed, and anticipated. A fraction of an error could make the difference between success and failure in this context carried lethal consequences. She crouched slightly to examine a digital rangefinder readout. The device displayed the distance with near microscopic precision, but Mara relied on more than electronics. Years of observation, practice, and instinct allowed her to visualize trajectories, anticipate environmental effects, and adjust for variables that no sensor could fully account for. Her mind translated abstract data into a physical understanding of the landscape. She imagined the bullet's path, its arc over rocks and sand, the effect of wind, gravity, and heat. Each mental calculation was rehearsed again and again, a silent dialogue with physics itself. Her team murmured about the challenge, some expressing doubt at the feasibility of the shot. Mara remained calm, listening without comment. She had learned long ago that hesitation or skepticism weakened focus, both for oneself and for teammates. Confidence, born of preparation and experience, was far more valuable than bravado. The briefing officer continued, detailing enemy patrol patterns, movement probabilities, and timing windows for engagement. Mara absorbed every detail, mentally overlaying it onto her mental map of the terrain. The rifle would be her instrument, her training her guide, and patience her greatest ally. The SEALs she had noticed days earlier watched from his concealed ridge. He had tracked her movements over the past hour, impressed by the precision and discipline she displayed. Now, as the mission briefing unfolded, he observed her absorbing every detail, her mind translating words into calculations, coordinates into trajectories, probabilities into action plans. It was clear to him that she was not only capable, but exceptional. Few soldiers could combine calm analytical skill with instinctive execution at this level, and rarer still were those who could maintain such focus under the looming pressure of extreme risk. Mara's hands moved automatically as she tested her rifle again, checking the alignment of the scope and the tension of the trigger. Each adjustment was informed by the briefing, integrating new variables into her existing calculations. She tested the bipod, ensuring stability on the uneven desert floor. Every action was deliberate, executed with quiet precision. She had become almost symbiotic with her rifle, each component familiar, each response instinctive. She envisioned the bullet leaving the barrel, flying over almost 3 kilometers of desert terrain, guided by calculation, experience, and perfect execution. The target's profile was complex, moving sporadically, blending into the desert environment. Mara considered the movement patterns, adjusting for anticipated shifts over time. She ran mental simulations, accounting for wind gusts, mirage distortions, and potential obstructions. The rifle, though powerful, was only a tool. The success of this mission relied entirely on the operator. Mara's mind worked through contingencies with precision. What if the wind changed mid-shot? What if the heat shimmer distorted the target? How would the angle of the terrain affect trajectory? Each scenario had a corresponding adjustment, each contingency accounted for before a single round was fired. Her teammates exchanged hushed observations. They had confidence in her skill, yet the enormity of the distance remained intimidating. A nearly 3-kilometer shot was at the extreme edge of physics and ballistics, and yet Mara appeared entirely unconcerned. Her demeanor was one of calm assurance, not arrogance. She had mastered extreme range marksmanship through meticulous training and unwavering focus. Each factor, each variable, each possibility was already accounted for in her mind, rehearsed until instinct would take over at the moment of engagement. The SEAL adjusted his position slightly, observing her with new understanding. Her mental precision, coupled with physical mastery of her rifle, made her a force he would trust implicitly in a critical engagement. Few soldiers inspired this level of confidence without ever speaking a word. Mara's reputation, though unknown to him until now, was justified. She did not need recognition. Her skill spoke for itself. The desert itself seemed to recognize her competence. Each shifting shadow and heat shimmer a silent witness to her readiness. Mara crouched over her rifle again, testing the trigger pull, aligning the crosshairs on the distant ridges that might serve as reference points for her shot. She ran mental calculations rapidly. Wind speed, distance, bullet drop, atmospheric density, heat shimmer. Every factor had been rehearsed countless times, yet she treated this as a unique situation. Even with extreme preparation, reality demanded adaptability. Her mind remained alert, ready to adjust, ready to execute. Failure was not an option. Success required perfection in both preparation and execution. The mission briefing concluded, but Mara did not move immediately. She allowed the information to settle, reviewing it in her mind, overlaying it with the mental map she had created while observing the terrain. Each detail became a vector, each variable a potential influence on the bullet's flight. Her training ensured that she could translate this complex array of data into actionable execution. The rifle was ready, the terrain understood, the trajectory visualized, and her mind focused. She had prepared for this moment with years of discipline, every second of practice converging toward this extreme challenge. Her teammates began moving into position, setting up observation points, establishing communication links, and ensuring safety protocols. Mara walked calmly to her assigned firing position, her rifle steady against her shoulder. The desert around her stretched endlessly, shimmering in the heat, dotted with ridges, rocks, and distant shadows. She scanned the horizon one last time, her mind running through mental calculations, checking every variable, anticipating every possible complication. She was ready. The SEAL observed silently from above, recognizing the intensity of her preparation and the mastery it represented. Mara knelt, testing her bipod again, adjusting for uneven sand and minor inclines. She peered through her scope, aligning her crosshairs with distant reference points. Wind measurements, temperature gradients, mirage distortions, all were accounted for in her calculations. Her pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. The target's position was confirmed, and the extreme distance no longer intimidated her. She had visualized the shot, rehearsed every adjustment, and internalized the desert's subtle signals. Execution was imminent. The SEAL finally allowed himself a quiet exhale, impressed not only by her skill, but by her mental discipline. He had witnessed countless soldiers, snipers, and marksmen, Yet few possessed the combination of analytical rigor, physical mastery, and calm presence that Mara exhibited. This was someone who could not only survive extreme conditions, but excel within them. Someone whose preparation and focus could turn the impossible into reality. She was already executing the mission in her mind, long before the first shot would be fired. Mara adjusted the rifle one final time, aligning the crosshairs precisely on a distant ridge that served as a proxy for her eventual target. Her mind ran through the sequence of firing, tracking, and observing impact. Each variable had a corresponding adjustment, each contingency accounted for. She breathed slowly, centering herself, mentally rehearsing the shot, visualizing the bullet's flight over nearly 3 kilometers of desert terrain. Every action, every calculation, every subtle movement was synchronized, a testament to her discipline, skill, and preparation. The mission was ready to commence, yet Mara remained calm, almost serene. The desert stretched endlessly around her, each ridge, shadow, and heat shimmer a potential variable. She had absorbed the briefing, internalized the terrain, and prepared her rifle with meticulous precision. Success depended not on luck, but on preparation, skill, and execution. As the team settled into their positions, Mara's mind remained clear, focused, and ready. Every element, from the rifle to the desert to the bullet's arc, was accounted for. The extreme distance no longer intimidated her. She was ready to execute. Mara knelt in the soft, sun-baked sand, her M2010 resting solidly on its bipod. The rifle had been cleaned, calibrated, and tested countless times, yet today demanded more than routine preparation. The target lay almost 3 kilometers away, a distance at which even the most experienced snipers often faltered. She lowered her eye to the scope and let the desert stretch out before her. Every ridge, every glimmer of sunlight on sand, every subtle shadow became a potential variable to consider. Precision, she reminded herself silently, was not a matter of luck. It was mastery over every detail. The wind, invisible but persistent, whispered across the desert. Mara felt it on her face, noting the faint differences at various elevations. One ridge created turbulence. A small dune deflected the current slightly. She adjusted her mental calculations, visualizing how each subtle gust would influence a bullet over nearly 3 kilometers. The M2010, formidable and accurate, could not compensate for neglecting environmental factors. She ran through the numbers in her mind: wind speed, angle, temperature, humidity, air pressure. Every factor mattered. A single miscalculation could render the shot impossible. Her fingers hovered over the trigger, steady but ready to move with the slightest instruction from her mind. Years of training had taught her that the rifle and the shooter were not separate. They were extensions of one another. The moment of firing would be instantaneous, yet the preparation required hours of calculation and observation. She scanned the terrain through her scope, adjusting for mirage distortion that shimmered faintly across the heat-rippled desert. Tiny shifts in visual cues could alter perception. She accounted for each one, predicting how light, heat, and shadow would affect her aim. The seal, hidden on the ridge above, observed her every movement with quiet admiration. He had seen countless marksmen execute difficult shots, but Mara's approach was different. She was not simply firing. She was calculating a conversation with physics itself. Each adjustment to the scope, each small shift in posture, was a dialogue with the variables that governed the bullet's flight. He could sense the almost imperceptible mental computations she made in real time, anticipating environmental changes and compensating with near-instinctive precision. Few soldiers could maintain such intense focus without error. Mara's breath slowed. She inhaled deeply, letting her lungs fill, then exhaled, steadying her heartbeat. Precision was rhythm as much as calculation. She moved slowly, adjusting the bipod slightly, testing the stability of the sand beneath it. Heat shimmer rose from the desert, distorting the terrain subtly. Mara observed it carefully, imagining the bullet's flight as it would bend imperceptibly over 2,942 meters. She rehearsed mentally, first the wind correction, then the elevation adjustment, then the trajectory over the crest of the distant ridge. Every factor was internalized, every possibility accounted for. Her team watched from their positions, maintaining quiet as they prepared to support her shot. Even in the tense silence, they knew she had executed similar calculations before, but nothing this extreme. Mara was capable of executing shots beyond the edge of conventional marksmanship. Her mental process was rigorous. She considered rotation, spin, gravity, temperature effects, and even the angle of the sun on reflective surfaces that could briefly mislead her eye. The desert was not passive. It was an active participant in her calculations. She focused on a distant marker, a shadowed rock on the ridge that approximated the target's location. Her scope magnified the distant terrain, revealing minor elevations, ridges, and variations in the sand. She adjusted her crosshairs, compensating for elevation and anticipated wind drift. Her calculations were precise. The rifle would deliver the bullet to the target if executed flawlessly. Mara's mind traced the bullet's path mentally, watching as it traveled over the terrain in a simulation only she could see. The SEAL's jaw tightened in silent awe. He realized that Mara was preparing a shot few believed possible. Mara closed her eyes briefly, imagining the journey of the projectile. Every microsecond mattered. Gravity would slowly pull it downward. Wind would drift it. Heat shimmer could deflect perception. She accounted for these variables, anticipating each effect. Her M2010, capable of extreme accuracy, would not compensate for human error. She became the rifle, and the rifle became her. It was a conversation of precision, an intimate dance with the forces of nature that could only be executed by someone who understood them completely. The sun rose higher, intensifying the heat and the visual distortions across the desert. Mara adjusted her scope, testing minor corrections for mirage-induced shifts. Her breathing was slow, deliberate. She exhaled, centering herself. Each heartbeat synchronized with her calculations, each movement deliberate. She imagined the bullet leaving the barrel, its rotation stabilizing in flight, the arc carefully calculated to intersect with the target. Years of experience had taught her that preparation and anticipation were far more important than speed. Precision demanded patience, and patience defined her craft. The SEAL observed, almost holding his own breath. He had seen extreme shots before, but the confidence, calm, and discipline Mara exhibited were extraordinary. Her adjustments were subtle but deliberate. Tiny shifts in posture, micro-corrections in scope alignment, mental recalculations for wind, heat, and distance, all executed in silence. He realized that a shot of this magnitude required not just physical skill, but an extraordinary mental acuity, the ability to calculate variables faster than the desert could shift. Mara possessed it in abundance. She tested the trigger one final time, feeling the resistance, the pull, and the potential energy stored in her finger. Her mind calculated bullet drop over 2,942 meters, wind, drift, rotation, and temperature effects in a seamless flow. Every variable, every minor factor, had been rehearsed hundreds of times mentally. Mara's calm exterior concealed the complexity of her mental calculations, yet the SEAL could almost see them reflected in her steady gaze, unwavering focus, and precise movements. She was preparing for a shot few could even conceptualize. Her team maintained quiet, supporting her from a distance. Radios were silent, vehicles were positioned strategically, and observation points were reinforced. Even the smallest distraction could disrupt Mara's focus. She moved slowly, aligning the crosshairs with her mental markers on the distant ridge. Wind speed and direction were measured repeatedly, each adjustment refined incrementally. Heat shimmer distorted the landscape intermittently, and she compensated for each distortion, anticipating how it would affect perception over nearly 3 kilometers. The level of focus required was extreme, yet Mara maintained it effortlessly. Minutes passed like hours. Mara's mental simulations were complete. Now she waited for the perfect alignment of all variables. The desert seemed still, aware that something extraordinary was about to occur. The seal observed in silence, recognizing the magnitude of her calculations and the precision she was about to exercise. Mara was not simply aiming. She was orchestrating physics, executing mathematics, and harnessing environmental variables simultaneously with flawless timing. She was ready to turn theory into reality. Her gaze hardened, focusing on the precise point where the bullet would strike. She inhaled, exhaled, and allowed herself a final check of the rifle. Every micro-adjustment, every calculation, and every mental simulation had led to this moment. The desert stretched endlessly, shimmering in the heat, but Mara's focus condensed it into a single point in space, the target. She adjusted the scope slightly, accounting for a minor shift in the wind, and felt the rifle settle perfectly into place. Execution would soon follow preparation. The seal shifted slightly, his eyes fixed on her. He knew that the shot, when fired, would demonstrate the culmination of preparation, calculation, and skill. Few could visualize and account for environmental variables over nearly 3 kilometers. Fewer still could execute with the composure Mara displayed. Her calm, methodical movements spoke of mastery. The desert was her arena, the rifle her instrument, and the shot she was about to take would test the limits of human precision. Mara exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Her mind calculated the final trajectory, integrating wind, heat, mirage, and distance. The bullet's path was clear in her visualization, every possible deviation accounted for. She lowered her eye to the scope once more, aligning the crosshairs with perfect precision. The moment of firing would soon arrive. The desert held its silent breath. The SEAL's respect deepened, and Mara Bennett prepared to execute a shot that few would believe possible. Even when they saw it, the desert was alive with heat, shimmering in waves that distorted the distant horizon. Mara Bennett crouched low, her M2010 firmly planted on its bipod, every adjustment, calculation, and rehearsal complete. The target, nearly 3 kilometers away, was not a mere figure in the sand. It was the culmination of intelligence, observation, and precise preparation. Her eye traced the scope's crosshairs, her mind running through the final trajectory one last time. Patience, she reminded herself. Precision demanded patience. One false move, one miscalculation, and hours of preparation could collapse into failure. She exhaled slowly, letting her body settle into perfect alignment with the rifle. Muscles relaxed, pulse steady, fingers lightly resting on the trigger. Her mind was a storm of mental calculations and environmental analysis, yet her exterior betrayed no tension. She had rehearsed this shot countless times in simulations, over maps, and during training ranges. But this moment was the true test: the desert, the rifle, and the target combined into a challenge of nearly unimaginable difficulty. Every detail mattered: wind, mirage, bullet spin, elevation, temperature, distance. The SEAL watched from his concealed position on the ridge, noting every movement with silent awe. He had seen extreme shots before, but few demanded such precise mental synchronization. Mara was not just aiming. She was orchestrating physics. Every adjustment to her scope, every subtle movement of her fingers, every breath taken or held, was a factor in a chain of events that would culminate nearly 3 kilometers away. He realized that she had internalized every aspect of the rifle, the environment, and the task ahead, a rare combination of instinct, training, and calm. Mara inhaled again, filling her lungs slowly, then released, allowing her body and mind to synchronize. She adjusted the scope one final time, aligning the crosshairs with the faint shadow of a ridge that marked the target's approximate location. Her fingers flexed on the trigger, poised for the perfect squeeze. She did not rush. Rushing was the enemy of precision. The SEAL could almost feel the tension radiating from her, yet it was not nervousness, it was absolute control. Her mind and body were a single unit, prepared for the execution of something extraordinary. She considered the wind one last time. The desert was unpredictable, with subtle gusts shifting around dunes and ridges. Her calculations accounted for this, but she still visualized the bullet's flight path in minute detail, imagining how each disturbance could nudge it slightly off course. Her training allowed her to anticipate these effects and compensate before the trigger was even pulled. The rifle rested perfectly on the bipod. Every part, every bolt, every sight had been prepared meticulously. Her focus narrowed to a single point, the destination nearly 3 kilometers away. The CAL's eyes widened as he realized the enormity of what she was about to attempt. Few marksmen in the world could calculate, visualize, and execute a shot at this distance. Yet Mara did so with the ease of a professional who had spent years mastering her craft. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her posture relaxed yet deliberate. The desert around her seemed to fade, leaving only her, the rifle, and the distant target. Time itself seemed suspended as she prepared to bridge the nearly impossible gap between shooter and target. Mara's finger pressed gently against the trigger, feeling the resistance, the controlled tension, the feedback that had been rehearsed countless times. She exhaled once more, synchronizing her heartbeat with her mental calculation. Every variable had been accounted for: wind speed, angle, bullet drop, rotation, heat shimmer. She envisioned the bullet's arc, its path over the shimmering desert, its interaction with gravity and wind, its final trajectory toward the distant point where the target waited. The SEAL's gaze tracked her movements, understanding the gravity of the moment. He had observed extreme precision before, but the combination of mental calculation, calm execution, and physical mastery displayed by Mara was extraordinary. The rifle was no longer just a weapon. It had become an extension of her body, her instincts, and her mind. Every motion, however subtle, was purposeful, and he knew the bullet, when fired, would follow the path she had visualized with near-perfect accuracy. Mara exhaled fully, held her breath briefly, and then allowed herself to release it slowly as she applied pressure to the trigger. The M2010 responded as she expected, the click of the trigger a faint sound in the vast desert. The shot was released, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. The bullet left the barrel with lethal grace, beginning its journey across nearly 3 kilometers of open desert. Mara's mind tracked its trajectory, visualizing its arc over dunes, ridges, and heat waves, accounting for every environmental factor she had studied. The SEAL adjusted his optics to follow the distant line of the shot. Though invisible to the naked eye, the impact could be anticipated by the tiny movements of sand and dust near the target. He watched in disbelief as the distant figure, previously partially concealed by rocks, dropped precisely where Mara had calculated. The accuracy was astounding, confirming that years of training, meticulous preparation, and extraordinary focus had combined to achieve a near-impossible result. He could scarcely believe what he had witnessed. A shot of 2,942 meters, executed flawlessly. Mara's breathing returned to normal as she lowered her rifle slightly. The tension that had filled her body eased, but her focus remained sharp. She surveyed the surrounding desert, noting the subtle changes in heat shimmer and wind that had influenced the shot. Her mental calculations had proven accurate, her execution perfect. She allowed herself a brief, quiet smile. This was the result of patience, preparation, and discipline. The rifle was now resting again on the bipod, ready for whatever would come next, though the first shot had already established her skill beyond question. The SEAL moved slightly, impressed and humbled. He had witnessed many extraordinary acts in the field, but rarely had he observed such precision executed with such calm. Mara had not only fired a shot that defied expectation, but had done so with complete control, awareness, and discipline. He knew that she could perform this feat repeatedly if necessary, each time adjusting for environmental changes, each time visualizing the bullet's path with exacting accuracy. Few marksmen in history could claim such mastery. Mara's teammates approached quietly, checking on her position, scanning the surrounding terrain for secondary threats, and verifying the outcome. They offered brief nods of acknowledgement, knowing that this shot was remarkable, not only for its distance, but for the composure and skill required to execute it. Mara responded with a simple nod, almost dismissive in tone, as though this level of performance were simply part of her routine. For her, the extraordinary had become the expected through training, patience, and precision. The desert remained quiet, the sun climbing higher, shadows shifting across the sand. Mara's eyes scanned the distant ridges, ensuring that no unforeseen variables had interfered with the shot. The SEAL continued observing from above, silently acknowledging the skill displayed below. He realized that this was not just a demonstration of marksmanship. It was a demonstration of human calculation, patience, and discipline at the very limits of possibility. Mara had transformed her training into action, turning theory into reality with breathtaking efficiency. Mara carefully cleaned the rifle again, almost as though nothing remarkable had occurred. Each motion was deliberate, yet calm and unhurried. She checked the scope, the barrel, and the bipod, ensuring that everything remained in perfect condition. The SEAL remained in his concealed position, taking in the quiet aftermath of an extraordinary achievement. The desert, vast and unyielding, had witnessed a feat few could comprehend. A sniper, alone and disciplined, executing a shot of nearly 3 kilometers with flawless precision. Even as Mara resumed her observation of the surrounding terrain, the impact of the shot lingered. Every member of her team understood the significance, even if only silently. The bullet had traversed nearly 3 kilometers of desert, meeting its mark perfectly, a testament to the combination of skill, discipline, and mental focus that defined Mara Bennett. The SEAL finally allowed himself a quiet, awed breath. In this moment, he recognized a master at work, someone who had achieved what few in history could even imagine. Mara's mind, already moving forward, considered the implications of the shot. She analyzed the trajectory, the wind adjustments, the effect of heat shimmer, and the precise placement of the bullet. Everything had aligned perfectly, a testament to her training and the seamless integration of skill, observation, and calculation. The SEAL, watching silently, realized that he had witnessed a rare event. A sniper operating at the edge of human capability, executing a shot that defied conventional expectation. The desert seemed to settle again, the tension released into the heat-hazed horizon. Mara lowered the rifle finally, satisfied that every calculation had been accurate, every adjustment precise, and every potential obstacle accounted for. The SEAL remained on his ridge, nodding subtly in recognition of what had just occurred. Mara had demonstrated that preparation, patience, and focus could achieve the impossible, that mastery of both rifle and environment could convert theory into tangible, near-perfect reality. The desert seemed to exhale a long, silent breath as the bullet found its mark. Mara Bennett lowered her M2010 slowly, her hand still steady from the precision of the extreme distance shot. Her mind ran through the trajectory one last time, verifying every calculation, every micro-adjustment. She had executed a shot nearly 3 kilometers away, an achievement that would be studied, analyzed, and remembered. And yet, despite the magnitude of her accomplishment, Mara moved with quiet calm, as though this were simply another task completed, routine in its demands on discipline and preparation. Her team, spread across observation points, began cautiously moving closer. Radios crackled faintly with updates from their overwatch, confirming that the target had been neutralized. The words "target down" carried a weight beyond their literal meaning. In that moment, Mara's calculations, patience, and skill had converged perfectly. Her teammates exchanged brief glances of respect and astonishment. Few had witnessed such a display of precision, and even fewer could replicate it. The magnitude of what had just occurred slowly began to sink in. The SEAL, observing from his ridge, adjusted his optics and confirmed the result. The distant terrain bore silent witness to Mara's skill. He allowed himself a slow exhale, a mixture of awe and professional respect. Rarely had he seen a sniper operate at such a level, where mental calculation, environmental mastery, and physical execution combined seamlessly. Mara's calm demeanor contrasted with the extraordinary precision she had just achieved. To the untrained eye, she was merely cleaning her rifle moments ago. Now, she had rewritten expectations of what human skill could accomplish in the field. Mara's focus shifted immediately to assessment and readiness. Though the shot had been executed flawlessly, the desert remained an unpredictable environment. She scanned the horizon through her scope, observing potential secondary threats, verifying that no unintended variables had affected the outcome. The extreme distance shot had been a test not just of skill, but of composure under pressure. Mara's eyes, sharp and unwavering, moved deliberately over the terrain, cataloging details, noting shadows, ridges, and shifts in wind patterns. Precision was not a moment, it was continuous, maintained long after the shot had been fired. Her teammates gathered near her, moving efficiently and silently. They knew that in Mara's presence, protocol and discipline were paramount. There was no shouting, no unnecessary celebration, just measured acknowledgement of a remarkable achievement. A team member approached with a radio update confirming the target's elimination and providing additional intelligence gathered by the Overwatch team. Mara absorbed it quickly, adjusting her mental map of the battlefield and preparing for potential next steps. The operation was far from over, and her role demanded constant readiness. The SEAL descended slowly toward her position, navigating the uneven desert terrain with practiced ease. He approached cautiously, as if intruding on a private moment of precision and professionalism. When he reached a safe distance, he offered a quiet nod of respect. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice low, betraying a rare mixture of awe and admiration. Mara acknowledged him with a simple nod, neither boastful nor dismissive. In her world, success was measured by execution, not accolades. The desert, the rifle, and her skill were the only metrics that truly mattered. He studied her quietly, noting the calm control she maintained despite the extremity of her achievement. "I've seen long-range shots," he continued, "but that's beyond what most would attempt. The precision, the calculation, it's incredible." Mara glanced at him briefly, her expression composed, almost indifferent to the praise. She had prepared meticulously for this moment. The execution had been a matter of focus and discipline. Recognition, though acknowledged, was not necessary. Her work spoke for itself, even if few could fully comprehend it. The team began packing equipment, preparing for the next phase of the operation. Mara assisted where necessary, her movements efficient and precise. Yet her mind remained partially occupied with the environment, the trajectory, and potential adjustments should another engagement arise. Extreme range marksmanship was not a spectacle. It was a tool, and every tool demanded mastery and vigilance. She cleaned her scope, checked the bipod, and re-inspected her rifle, ensuring it remained in perfect condition. Preparation was ongoing. Mastery was continuous. The SEAL followed her movements, silently observing. He had expected proficiency, but not this level of control, focus, and calm execution. He realized that Mara Bennett was not only a master marksman, but also a professional who could maintain composure under pressure and in extreme conditions. Her skill was not flashy or theatrical. It was methodical, deliberate, and deeply effective. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, was her domain, and she had navigated it with intelligence, precision, and grace. Mara's mind shifted to the strategic implications of her shot. While the immediate objective had been achieved, the operation's success depended on broader situational awareness. She calculated potential reactions from remaining enemy elements, assessing vantage points, lines of sight, and secondary targets. Her rifle, though momentarily silent, remained ready. Every step she took, every glance she made, was informed by experience, training, and intuition. For Mara, victory was never singular. It was continuous vigilance and disciplined execution. Her teammates began discussing the next phase quietly, maintaining radio discipline and observation protocols. Mara remained partially withdrawn, her focus alternating between tactical awareness and meticulous maintenance of her weapon. The rifle, now a trusted extension of her skill, required ongoing care and attention. Even after executing what many would call a near-impossible shot, she treated the task of maintenance with the same seriousness as the mission itself. Precision extended beyond firing. It included preparation, assessment, and readiness for what might follow. The SEAL stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "I've been in operations where every shot counts," he said. "But you just proved something most of us couldn't even imagine. That distance, that accuracy, it's not human. You made it look effortless." Mara nodded slightly, her eyes scanning the horizon, adjusting for subtle environmental changes. "It's not about effort," she said quietly. "It's about calculation and discipline. Preparation, anticipation. Everything else follows." Her calm tone, even in the wake of extraordinary achievement, underscored the professional rigor that defined her. As the team began moving toward extraction points, Mara remained vigilant. She scanned the desert with methodical patience, noting shadows, ridges, and wind patterns, each subtle detail catalogued in her mind. The SEAL walked alongside her briefly, matching her pace, observing the seamless integration of calculation, observation, and physical skill. The quiet professionalism she displayed left a lasting impression. There was no need for fanfare. Her actions alone communicated mastery. Mara paused near a ridge, checking her rifle one last time before continuing. The SEAL watched as she adjusted her scope, tested the bipod, and ran her fingers over the stock. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, and yet entirely practical. She had completed a historic shot, but her mind remained fixed on the next task, the next calculation, the next potential engagement. The desert demanded attention, and she was fully aware that mastery was continuous. Not momentary. Her teammates had settled into vehicles, preparing to depart, but Mara lingered, scanning the horizon one final time. The wind, the heat shimmer, and the shifting shadows all continued to influence perception, and she accounted for every subtle variable. The SEAL remained nearby, quietly admiring the discipline and composure she maintained, even after performing an achievement that would be considered legendary. To him, this was not just marksmanship, it was professionalism elevated to art, a perfect synthesis of mind, skill, and environment. Finally, Mara lowered her rifle fully and stood. Her posture remained calm, her breathing steady. The desert stretched endlessly around her, yet she remained entirely in control, fully aware of every potential threat and variable. The SEAL gave a final nod, a mixture of respect and astonishment. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary. A sniper executing a shot at nearly 3 kilometers with flawless precision, and doing so with discipline, composure, and humility that few could match. Mara walked toward the vehicles, the weight of her rifle resting comfortably on her shoulder. She maintained her professional focus, yet there was a quiet satisfaction in her stride. The mission had been executed successfully, the extreme distance shot completed, and the team remained ready for what came next. The desert had tested her, challenged her, and yet she had responded with skill and precision. The SEAL followed silently, recognizing that he had just observed a master at work, someone whose discipline and expertise had redefined the boundaries of possibility in the field. As the vehicles rumbled across the sand, Mara glanced one last time at the distant ridge where the shot had landed. The bullet had traveled nearly 3 kilometers, guided by calculation, training, and instinct. The target was neutralized, but more than that, Mara had demonstrated the full extent of human precision and discipline. Her professionalism, calm and meticulous care for her rifle, had made the impossible achievable, leaving an indelible impression on her teammates and the SEAL who had witnessed it. The desert sun climbed higher, casting long wavering shadows across the sand as Mara Bennett and her team regrouped near the extraction point. The operation had concluded, the high-value target neutralized, and the extreme distance shot executed with flawless precision. Yet despite the magnitude of what had just occurred, Mara moved quietly, systematically checking her equipment and assisting her teammates with measured efficiency. Her hands were steady, her movements deliberate, and her eyes never strayed from the environment. Every action, however routine, reflected her discipline and professionalism. Her team, meanwhile, was buzzing with quiet awe. Whispers circulated among the operators about the nearly 3-kilometer shot, about the precision, and about the control she had maintained throughout. One of the junior snipers approached Mara hesitantly, his voice low and respectful. "I've never seen anything like that," he admitted. Mara offered a slight nod, her expression composed yet reassuring. Praise, though appreciated, was secondary to the discipline that had allowed her to succeed. The shot was not for recognition. It was a calculated execution of skill at the highest level. The SEAL, who had observed the entire event from his concealed ridge, finally approached Mara as she adjusted her rifle one last time. His eyes reflected a mix of respect, astonishment, and professional curiosity. "I've been in the field a long time," he said quietly, "but I've never seen anyone execute a shot like that. Nearly 3 kilometers. Perfect alignment, perfect timing. You didn't just hit a target, you redefined what's possible." Mara regarded him briefly, her calm exterior unwavering. "It's not about redefining," she replied softly. "It's about preparation, focus, and discipline. The shot was a result of all three, nothing more." The SEAL nodded, recognizing the humility behind her words. Few operators combined such technical mastery with composure. Most would have let ego inflate after a feat of this magnitude. Mara, however, remained grounded, almost indifferent to the extraordinary nature of her accomplishment. To her, success was measured by execution and readiness, not by accolades or recognition. She had performed flawlessly, but she knew that every victory, every precise shot, demanded continued focus. The desert, the rifle, and the mission were ongoing challenges, not single events to be celebrated. The team gathered around the extraction point, vehicles rumbling softly in the sand as they prepared to depart. Mara moved among them efficiently, checking communication links, verifying coordinates, and ensuring that the equipment remained in optimal condition. She was methodical, meticulous, and vigilant. The magnitude of her recent achievement did not slow her or distract her from the ongoing responsibilities of the mission. Her mind, trained to assess, calculate, and anticipate, remained fully engaged, even as others quietly marveled at what had just been accomplished. The SEAL followed closely, observing how Mara conducted herself in the aftermath. He noted the seamless integration of skill, preparation, and humility. She did not flaunt the achievement. She simply continued performing her duties with quiet precision. Even after executing a nearly impossible shot, Mara's professionalism demanded that she remain focused, anticipating potential threats and ensuring the safety of her team. The lesson was clear. Mastery was not measured by a single moment, but by consistent vigilance, discipline, and adaptability. As the vehicles rolled across the desert, Mara's mind briefly wandered to the shot itself. Nearly 3 kilometers in extreme distance by any standard. She reviewed each calculation, each micro-adjustment, and each environmental consideration that had contributed to the success. Wind, mirage, elevation, rotation, temperature, all factors she had accounted for with meticulous precision. She had visualized the bullet's path before it had left the barrel, predicting its flight with an almost mathematical certainty. Even now, she mentally replayed the trajectory, confirming the execution and noting what she might adjust under slightly different conditions. Her teammates, seated quietly in the vehicles, gradually began discussing the shot among themselves. There was excitement in their voices, but it was tempered by professional respect. Mara listened, contributing only where necessary, her calm demeanor anchoring the discussion. She acknowledged their observations with slight nods or brief comments, careful not to allow emotion or ego to dominate the conversation. For her, the mission's success was not a moment for celebration, but an ongoing responsibility to remain vigilant and prepared for what lay ahead. The SEAL, riding alongside her, finally spoke again. "I've been in the field with some of the best marksmen," he said, his tone reflective. "But what you did today, it's exceptional. You made what seemed impossible, possible. And you did it without a single hesitation." Mara allowed a faint smile, a rare acknowledgement of personal satisfaction. "It's not impossible," she replied quietly. "It's just preparation, anticipation, and focus. Anyone can achieve it with the right combination of those 3 elements. Execution is everything. If you miss the details, the distance becomes insurmountable." The vehicles carried them steadily toward their base, the desert landscape stretching endlessly around them. Mara's thoughts shifted to broader implications, future missions, potential challenges, and the constant need for vigilance. Extreme distance marksmanship was not merely a technical skill. It was a mindset, a discipline, and a commitment to precision. She reflected on how preparation extended beyond the rifle itself, encompassing observation, environmental awareness, and mental fortitude. The shot had been executed flawlessly, yet she understood that mastery demanded continual practice and awareness, even in the aftermath of success. Her teammates gradually became aware of the significance of what they had witnessed. The nearly 3-kilometer shot was not merely an isolated feat. It was a testament to training, patience, and instinct refined to perfection. Even among elite soldiers, such accomplishments were rare. Mara's execution demonstrated that skill, when combined with focus and preparation, could transcend conventional limits. Yet she remained composed, her focus never straying from readiness, ensuring that the mission's broader objectives were met. The SEAL, impressed beyond words, finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had witnessed countless operators in action, but few possessed the combination of skill, discipline, and humility that Mara displayed. She had executed a shot at the edge of human capability and maintained composure before, during, and after. The quiet professionalism, the meticulous attention to detail, and the unwavering focus created a rare presence in the field, someone who could be relied upon in extreme situations without hesitation or error. Mara's eyes scanned the desert one last time before the base came into view. Every shadow, every shifting ridge, every subtle gust of wind had been accounted for in her mind during the shot. The bullet's path had been visualized, calculated, and confirmed. Yet now, as she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, she considered the broader picture, the implications of such skill in future missions, the responsibility that came with precision, and the importance of maintaining composure under pressure. The lesson was clear. Mastery was continuous, not momentary. Upon returning to base, the team received formal confirmation of the mission's success. Debriefings followed, filled with analysis, strategy discussions, and logistical reviews. Mara participated fully, her insights focused, practical, and precise. She contributed to understanding the extreme-range shot, sharing observations without ego, emphasizing preparation, observation, and calculation over personal achievement. Her colleagues listened intently, recognizing both her skill and her professionalism. Even in discussions, she demonstrated the discipline that had defined her performance in the field. The SEAL lingered in the debriefing, observing Mara as she spoke. He had expected competence, but he witnessed something more, a combination of technical mastery, composure under pressure, and humility that was rare even among elite operators. She explained the factors affecting the shot-the-wind calculations, elevation adjustments, mirage corrections without exaggeration or embellishment. Her words reflected clarity and professionalism, emphasizing that the success was a product of preparation, focus, and disciplined execution, rather than luck or improvisation. Later, Mara returned to her quarters, finally allowing herself a moment of solitude. She cleaned her M2010 once more, methodically inspecting every component. The rifle had served as an extension of her skill, and she treated it with care, knowing that precision demanded meticulous attention to detail. She reflected on the shot, mentally reviewing each variable, each calculation, and each adjustment. Pride was quiet, almost imperceptible, yet present, a satisfaction rooted in flawless execution rather than recognition. She understood that mastery was measured by consistency, not single moments of brilliance. Even in reflection, Mara's mind was partially occupied with the environment, trajectories, and future operations. The extreme distance shot had proven her skill beyond question, yet she knew that continued vigilance and preparation were essential. The desert had tested her, the rifle had responded, and the calculation had been executed perfectly. Still, mastery demanded ongoing attention, anticipation, and practice. Mara's discipline, professionalism, and focus remained constant, guiding her in both accomplishment and reflection. The SEAL, observing from a distance during the debriefing and subsequent recognition of the mission's success, finally approached her privately. "You've set a new standard," he said, his voice low and respectful. Mara looked at him calmly, acknowledging the statement without pride or embellishment. "Standards are tools, not trophies," she replied. "Preparation and execution are everything. Recognition is secondary." His respect deepened further. He realized that Mara's excellence was not merely technical, but rooted in discipline, professionalism, and humility, the qualities that made her exceptional in every sense. Mara Bennett had achieved something extraordinary, but she carried it lightly. The desert, the rifle, and her focus had guided her through an almost impossible shot. Her teammates and the SEAL bore witness to her mastery, yet she remained composed, her focus on readiness and responsibility. The extreme distance kill would be remembered, discussed, and studied, but for Mara, it was part of a continuum, a demonstration of discipline, preparation, and execution that defined her approach to the craft. The desert had long since returned to its quiet rhythm, the sand shifting gently in the warm afternoon sun. Mara Bennett stood at the edge of the ridge one last time, her M2010 resting calmly on its bipod. The extreme distance shot, nearly 3 kilometers in length, had already become the stuff of whispered legend among her team and the SEAL who had witnessed it firsthand. Yet Mara herself regarded it as part of the continuum, a test of preparation, focus, and discipline, not a singular moment of glory. Her teammates were gathered nearby, completing final equipment checks and reviewing the mission. Their admiration for her skill was palpable, though unspoken. Each operator understood the enormity of what had just occurred, even if the details seemed almost unbelievable. The nearly 3-kilometer shot had required not just physical skill, but mental calculation, patience, and the seamless integration of environmental variables. For Mara, it was a moment of execution. For her team, it was a lesson in the extraordinary potential of focus and discipline. The SEAL approached her quietly, observing the way she methodically checked her rifle, her scope, and her bipod. "I've seen many incredible marksmen," he said softly, "but you've redefined precision in a way I never imagined." That shot, it wasn't just skill. It was calculation, discipline, and calm under pressure. "You made the impossible routine." Mara nodded slightly, her eyes scanning the horizon, as if the desert itself were an extension of her mind. "Routine is the product of preparation," she replied. "Precision comes from anticipation, observation, and focus. If you understand the variables, execution follows naturally." Her words resonated not as arrogance, but as a philosophy she lived by. To Mara, mastery was a process, not a single act. The extreme distance skill was an example of what rigorous discipline, mental calculation, and physical skill could achieve when combined. Yet she remained humble, aware that every shot carried risk, and that even the most prepared operator could face unforeseen challenges. Her calm demeanor, even after an achievement that would inspire awe in most, was a testament to her professionalism. The team began to reflect on the broader implications of the shot. Communication buzzed lightly in radios as reports from reconnaissance units confirmed the success of the mission. Observations of wind patterns, mirage distortion, and trajectory all validated Mara's calculations. The shot had been flawless, executed under environmental conditions that would have challenged even the most seasoned snipers. Her colleagues exchanged glances, both in disbelief and admiration, recognizing that they had just witnessed a display of marksmanship rarely achieved, let alone documented with such precision. Mara walked slowly along the ridge, scanning the terrain one last time. She observed the subtle heat shimmer rising from the sand, the shifting shadows of distant rocks, and the faint wind patterns weaving between ridges. Each detail was catalogued in her mind, a reflection of her habit of constant awareness. The extreme distance shot had tested her limits, but her focus remained unbroken. The desert, though vast and unpredictable, had been a canvas on which she executed her craft with extraordinary precision. The SEAL remained beside her, a silent witness to both her skill and her composure. He had anticipated excellence, but what he saw surpassed expectation. Mara's ability to integrate calculation, observation, and execution into a single flawless action impressed him beyond words. She was not only a marksman. She was a strategist, an observer, and a professional whose calm focus turned extreme challenges into achievable tasks. Her presence alone conveyed mastery, and her actions confirmed it. Later, back at base, the debriefing was detailed and thorough. Mara participated fully, providing technical observations about the extreme distance shot. She explained wind corrections, mirage calculations, trajectory adjustments, and elevation compensation with clarity and precision, emphasizing methodology over personal accomplishment. Her teammates listened intently, absorbing not only the technical insights, but also the demonstration of calm professionalism under extraordinary pressure. The shot had become more than a remarkable feat. It was now a learning moment. A blueprint for mastery under extreme conditions. The SEAL, sitting quietly through the debrief, took note of how she shared her knowledge. There was no boastfulness, no embellishment, only clear, methodical explanation. Her humility, combined with her technical mastery, left a lasting impression. Few operators could perform at this level, and even fewer could communicate the reasoning behind such extraordinary performance with such clarity. He realized that Mara's legacy would extend beyond the single shot. It would influence others, inspire them, and elevate the standards of marksmanship and professional discipline. In her private moments that evening, Mara reflected on the day's events. She reviewed the calculations in her mind, mentally replaying the trajectory of the bullet over nearly 3 kilometers of desert terrain. Each adjustment, every micro-correction, every environmental consideration had been executed perfectly. Satisfaction was quiet, almost imperceptible, rooted in the precision of her preparation and the flawless execution of the mission, rather than the recognition of others. This was her measure of success: accuracy, discipline, and readiness, executed in silence and with intention. Her thoughts wandered to the broader lessons she could impart to her team. The extreme distance shot was extraordinary, but the underlying principles were simple: preparation, observation, anticipation, and calm execution. She hoped her team internalized not just the technical aspects, but also the discipline, patience, and focus that enabled her to perform at the highest level. Mastery was not just skill, it was the integration of mental acuity, physical precision, and professional composure in the face of extreme conditions. The SEAL approached once more, offering his perspective. "You've set a new standard," he said quietly. "Not just for snipers, but for anyone in the field who faces impossible challenges. The way you prepared, the way you executed, it's inspiring." Mara acknowledged him with a small nod, her gaze still fixed on the desert horizon. "Standards are tools, not trophies," she said softly. "Execution is everything. Recognition comes second. Mastery is continuous. It doesn't end with a single shot." The days that followed were filled with analysis, follow-up missions, and ongoing training exercises. Mara continued to exemplify calm professionalism, precise calculation, and disciplined execution in every task. Her extreme distance shot became a reference point among her peers, a story recounted in hushed admiration and technical study. Yet Mara carried it lightly, understanding that her legacy was not measured by a single feat, but by consistent excellence, vigilance, and the ability to translate preparation into action under pressure. Her team gradually internalized the lesson. They observed her methods, her calm focus, and her systematic approach to calculation and execution. Mara's example elevated the standard for everyone around her. She had not merely completed an extraordinary shot. She had demonstrated the philosophy behind mastery: patience, preparation, awareness, and execution. The nearly 3-kilometer kill would be remembered, but the principles behind it would endure as a guide for future operations. Mara returned to her quarters in the evening, rifle cleaned and meticulously stored. The desert had tested her, challenged her, and provided a canvas for her extraordinary skill. She reflected quietly, reviewing her calculations, environmental observations, and the precise execution of the shot. There was satisfaction, yes, but it was calm, professional, and measured. For Mara, mastery was not spectacle, it was preparation, anticipation, and flawless execution, applied consistently, without ego, and with awareness of the responsibility her skill entailed. Even in the quiet moments, Mara's mind remained active. She considered potential future scenarios, environmental variables, and tactical challenges. The extreme distance shot was a milestone, yet it was also a reminder that mastery was continuous, vigilance essential, and preparation never complete. She understood that her legacy would not be defined by a single accomplishment, but by the consistent application of skill, discipline, and professional focus that elevated her and those around her. The SEAL, observing from afar in those quiet moments, recognized the full scope of Mara's impact. She had performed a feat nearly impossible by conventional standards, yet she had done so with humility, precision, and unwavering focus. Her legacy was not just the shot itself, but the demonstration of what preparation, discipline, and composure could achieve. She had inspired her team, set a standard of excellence, and redefined what was possible in extreme conditions. As the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows and golden hues across the sand, Mara stood quietly, rifle in hand, surveying the horizon one last time. The extreme distance kill was complete, the mission a success, and her focus remained as sharp as ever. She had demonstrated the power of preparation, the importance of calculation, and the value of calm, disciplined execution. In the end, her legacy was clear. Mastery is earned through patience, precision, and unwavering professionalism, a lesson that would endure far beyond the desert, far beyond the shot itself.